So here we go with making our headpieces for our disco dancers. We're going to start with working on the mannequin head, which you will receive. And I have made a template that goes over the head in a curved shape, because when you're making things that go on the head, if you keep them quite flat, they don't have a really good fit. So we figured out that if you can make a nice curve that sits on the forehead, these will stay on a whole lot better. So I have made it and I've covered it in gaffer tape, so that you can really see what you're doing. Your mannequin heads are white, so I didn't want to leave the white cardboard there or you wouldn't really see it. So the first thing you're going to do is tape that onto your mannequin head. So you won't be using this as an actual piece, it's your guide. So it's the guide for where you're going to put your brown paper when you come to making these headpieces. So the first thing you're going to do is going to pop that on, get it to fit your mannequin as best as you can. Yours will be different to mine. I'm assuming that's going to be the case, so you just get it to fit whatever best way you can. Get that little point right into where the nose is, and these little pieces should come around the sides of the eyes. So get that on first, and then you're going to wrap this head with a little bit of cling film to protect the head and to protect this piece here that you've put on. So wrap a little bit of cling film around the top of your head. So there's my mannequin head covered with cling film. You don't have to do the top of the head because the only part that we are going to work on is where your orange template is. So what you're going to use is gum tape or gum strip. And you might have used this before. If not, it's basically like a craft paper with a gummy back on it, like a dried gum on the back. You can see the shiny side there. So it acts like the old style stamps when you used to wet the stamp to stick it on a letter. So that is basically the same thing. So that is backed with gum that is activated with water. So you'll need a small sponge and a little bowl of water as well to do this. Now if you're precious about your table, you'll need to put something down to work on. Now it's only water and a bit of gum, but it does get quite wet. So if you want to cover your table, you could cover it even with a piece of cardboard or a placemat or something like that that you can work on. Now the gum strip comes in quite a big roll, as you can see there. That's the size of my hand, so they're really big. You might get one that's a little thinner in width, but I just want to tell you that this is a roll that's already been used quite a lot, and you can see the wet marks that are on the edge of your gum strip. That has happened because somebody has left that sitting on the table that they're working on. And that is rule number 1. Cut up all your pieces in advance and then put this away from your table, because your table will get wet. And if you leave this sitting down on top of the table, this one isn't as bad, but if you leave it long enough that the water soaks in, what it does is activates the glue on the edges, and you won't get this tape to come off anymore. It'll be ruined. So this one isn't too bad, but you can see the little rips that happen there. That can get a lot worse, and you could be left with a roll that has to be thrown in the bin basically. So if you roll off all your pieces, even if you have like a little shoebox or a big bowl and you want to like throw them all in there and then put this away so that it's nowhere near your workspace. So as I said, you might get a roll of gum strip that's shorter in diameter and in width. So this is the one that I have. It's about 2 inches wide. So I've cut them, I've ripped them for a start. I've ripped them. The best thing you can do with your gum strip is rip them rather than cutting them with the scissors, because see those edges that are there, they smooth down a whole lot better than the sharp edges. So if you rip it, it's definitely better. And then I've cut these down the middle, because this is actually quite a small space to work on and you want to be as neat as possible, so I've cut them smaller. But if you've got a thin roll, you won't have to cut them down the middle, but you can judge that as you go. So basically we are going to put 3 layers of gum strip on this orange headpiece. So I am just going to show you exactly what to do now. So there is your headpiece ready to go. Now if you don't like to work on the headpiece as it's wobbling around, you can always tape that to a plate or something a lot heavier than the polystyrene head, if that helps. Grand. And sometimes I use a plant pot and I just tape the mannequin head onto the plant pot, and that just keeps it really solid. For this I don't think it really matters too much, but I'll leave that to your own discretion. So basically, not too much water. You're going to wet the shiny side of your tape. just going to place that down and you're going to rub it in. So being as neat as possible is always best for these kind of things. We'll be covering this with a fabric, so we don't want edges sticking out everywhere. So just as neat as you can, get all those little edges pressed down, and basically you're just going to try and cover the orange bits. Now it's fine to go over it if you find that easier, because you can always trim this off after you're done. So I'm just going to cover that, and see I'm smoothing everything down really well, so you can't really see the edges of the tape. So you're just going to cover that all the way down. Not too much water. You can kind of assess as you go, and you'll kind of figure it out for yourself how much water to put in your sponge. Don't be tempted to keep your sponge in the water, which happens all the time when I'm working with kids in different projects. They throw the sponge back in there because it soaks up way too much water, and you have to squeeze it back out again. The last thing you want is really wet head pieces, because they'll take a really long time to dry. Also, don't be tempted to wet the outside of the paper after you put it on to smooth it down. It doesn't do anything, it doesn't help, you're just disintegrating the paper. So you want to keep the outside of it dry, and you just want to activate the shiny side. So once you get that all covered, we need to do 3 layers. So how are you going to know you've got 3 layers done when all the paper is brown? Well, once you've got that done, you'll take a marker, ballpoint pen, anything that'll make a mark, and you'll just put little marks on it like that. Again, if you have wet the outside of your paper, you'll ruin your marker if you're using that onto something that's a wet surface. So you would cover all that. So then when the next layer you put on, you're trying to cover all the black bits or whatever marks that you put on it. So that's just a way of figuring out which layer is which. So once you've got all of that done, we're going to leave it to dry for an hour or so. You can even put it somewhere kind of warm, but obviously you're working on a polystyrene head, so don't leave it sitting on a radiator or anywhere that's like direct heat. So just give it its time to dry, and once it's dry, you're just going to open the cellophane at the back and you're going to pop that off, and then you can work on your next one, because your template will still be underneath. So there is my 3 layers done. As you can see, I've gone over the edge, I've lost a bit of the shape at the front, but that is totally fine, because we can trim that all off afterwards, and I've just gone as far as the template. So once that's dry, I'll pop that off, and we will cover that with fabric, and we'll add ties that go from here to the back, and then we're going to fill out the hair, the headpiece, with some tulle or dress net, which I have here. We're going to add that all around so it becomes like a nice hair. Again, I will be doing probably the wrong colour. You guys will have much more exciting colours than me, but this is just a prototype, just so that I can show you exactly how to put that together. So there it is glued. I just glued down one side. I let a little overhang down here, so I think that would be a good idea, just a little bit hang off the edges there. And then I did the other side, so you're left with like a little hairband, really, a headband. So make sure that's fully dry before you put it onto your mannequin. Also make sure that your tape is fully dry before you put the glue on, because obviously if it goes onto something wet, then it's not going to stick, and this is going to take quite a lot of pulling when people are pulling it on and off their heads, so you need to make sure that that's stuck really well. So there it is glued. I just glued down one side. I let a little overhang down here, so I think that would be a good idea, just a little bit hang off the edges there. And then I did the other side, so you're left with like a little hairband, really, or headband. So make sure that's fully dry before you put it onto your mannequin. Also make sure that your tape is fully dry before you put the glue on, because obviously if it goes onto something wet, then it's not going to stick, and this is going to take quite a lot of pulling when people are pulling it on and off their heads, so you need to make sure that that's stuck really well. The next thing we're going to do once you have covered your inside, so that's my inside nice and neatly covered, so you want to make that nice and neat because that's going to be against somebody's head, is we're going to add some lycra tie. So this will all go in one piece, so we will stick it on one side here and then we'll stick it on the other side there, and it'll go on just like a little hat. So there's the piece. I will give you a template for that as well so that you know the right size to cut. So we're just going to glue the edge of our headpiece down here, and then we're just going to glue that on the edges there. So there we have it on the mannequin's head. So it should be fairly tight, but you should be able to get that on that mannequin's head pretty easily. If you try the first one out and it is too tight to put on the mannequin's head, then you just need to make the template a little longer. The lycra that you'll be getting to use this could be a slightly different grade to mine, so it might have more stretch or a little less stretch. So if you could try the first one out and make sure that it fits really easily, and you know there's quite a bit of give there. If somebody's head is bigger, it'll stretch back a little smaller if somebody's head is smaller than the template as well. So you just have to test that one out. I'll give you the size that I've done here, and you can judge it accordingly. So the next thing we're going to do while working on your mannequin's head is to add the sparkly fabric at the front. Now I don't have the correct fabric here, so I have red small sequin fabric. So it's basically the same. It's the same mesh fabric. Your sequins might be a little bigger, and you'll have a lot nicer colors than this one. So basically we're just going to cover from here over our cardboard. You can leave a little bit of cardboard at the top. I'll give you a template for this, I think, anyway, and come down the sides, and then you'll trim off the excess across the headpiece here. Now what you won't do is fold it underneath. We will cut it flush with the edge when we're taking it off, because sequin is quite sore. So if you fold it under, the glue combined with the sequin means that would be scratching against somebody's head. So we're going to cut the template flush on the head. So a quick note on this fabric is that it stretches more one way than the other. So when you cut your band to put on across your head, you want to cut it on the stretchy way. So this one stretches this way and not so much that way. So if I show you, that's got a lot of stretch there, whereas the opposite way, you can see there, it just doesn't want to go. I'm trying to do this one-handed while holding the video. So yeah, so just test out the fabric before you cut your template. So you want to go with the stretch and not against the stretch. So you want to have a stretchy headband that goes across. So yeah, so I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to show you how to stick that on. So there is my stretchy sequin fabric stretched across the head of the mannequin. Now I started on one side and I popped a little pin to keep it in place, which is what you'll need to do. You obviously won't be able to pin through the hard cardboard, so it'll be a little bit of trial and error, get the pin in so that the whole thing is pretty even, and so you've got that nice stretch across the head. So what you're going to do then is you're just going to do, because we want it to be glued down, stretched, so you're just going to fold back the fabric and get the glue in behind and then smooth that down. So I'll set the camera up and show you me gluing that down so that you can copy that. So there we are, stretched across. You want to make sure you're getting to the cardboard, the tip of the cardboard there, and of course these little corners down there as well. So you may need to do a bit more stretch as you go. But we're going to start, well, firstly make sure that if you have another pin, just to make sure you don't end up pulling that, you could pin that there so that won't move. And then we're going to start with the top. So we're just going to fold that back I'm going to get the glue gun in there. I'm going to spread that glue around. Make sure you're going over the edges of the Lycra headband that you put on, because that will give it extra strength. So I'm going to flip that back. Now it doesn't matter that the cardboard is exposed at the top, we're going to be filling that up anyway. So at this point it will probably be good to have a little bit of foam. This is mesh, so the glue gun will come through it really easily. So you want to make sure that you've got something to bat that down so that you don't burn your fingers. So you've got the top bit done. Then you can move on to doing the sides. And again, you need to spread out that glue really well. Not very much glue, you really don't need very much for this. And then stretch that out as you're popping that down, and then get a little bit of foam just to bat that down. If you put too much glue on, the glue comes through the mesh, and then wherever you're batting down, you'll end up getting a horrible glue mark. So as much as possible, you want to use a little tiny bit of glue to get that on. And you can do small bits at a time. That's entirely up to you what speed and how far you go with these at a time. So then we're on to our other side. Lift up as much as possible, and then just get that glue in there. Again, covering over your Lycra band. And then stretch your fabric out and down. And just pop that down. My hands are well used to the glue, so if you use a wee bit of foam, that would be better for you. And then the last bit in the middle, you should be able to get quite a good amount of that lifted up. And just get that glued as close to the edge as you can get with the glue gun. And again, stretch it out and then down. And just back that down. So that is our sequin piece put on. We're gonna cut off this excess piece here, because if we glue this down to the Lycra, you'll end up gluing the Lycra and you'll take away the stretch that we really need to be there. So we're just going to take that off, and then you can trim it. Now this can be trimmed really roughly because we're going to fill this up with some dress net anyway. And so once you have a little look there, that piece is not stuck, you just get a little tiny bit of glue in there. Get that popped down. Now you'll probably have a piece here that you haven't managed to glue down. We won't worry about that for the moment. What we'll do is we'll get the glue gun under there once we trim off these edges. So just trim that off too. Like I said, that can be really rough. And we're still on the cardboard there, so I'm just going to give another little bit of glue onto that. Make sure that's stuck really well. So once that is sufficiently glued, you're just going to pop that off your mannequin head, and then you'll see the parts that you need to cut off. So just get in there with a good scissors. It'll be hard to be neat with this part because you're dealing with a curve this way and a curve this way with the shape of the headpiece. So just trim them as neatly as you can, making sure that you don't end up cutting your Lycra. Just kind of getting in the way there. So that is that trimmed off. So that is your headpiece, your sparkly headpiece done. So the next thing we're going to do is move on to doing the dress net, which is going to be filling up all those parts here. So it's going to give a kind of a wig effect. So I can see bits there that I haven't managed to glue down. I'm just going to get in there, a little bit of glue, just a tiny bit, and spread it all around, and just back that down. It's the same on that side. A little bit of glue, spread it really well. Just back that down. So for the next bit, you're actually going to need to put something protective on your polystyrene head, because we'll be gluing onto this headband, and because the lycra is stretched out, there's more chance of the glue going through the headband and onto your polystyrene head, which will melt your polystyrene head, or if nothing else, the band will stick to it. So we're going to have to put a piece of cardboard in there so that we can work without ruining our polystyrene head. So I just got a piece of A4 paper in there, and I just folded it over and I taped that onto the mannequin head. And there's a little gap there, but that's fine. What we'll do is when we're sticking down, we'll just skip over that so that we don't stick the fabric to the polystyrene head. So yeah, there's just the paper underneath. So just a piece of A4 paper. It can be anything really. So for our hair, we're going to use dress net or tulle. Now I have pieces here that were cut from a big roll, but you'll receive 6 inches rolls, so they'll be a lot easier to use than having to cut up a big roll. So you'll get like a continuous roll of tulle, so you can work with as much or as little as you want at a time. And what you would do is roll off quite a bit, or as much as you're going to use, maybe a meter, and then fold it over a few times on itself, and then you're going to cut lines up the tulle, basically to turn it into strips like this. Now you're going to leave a bit at the edge because this is where we're going to stick it. So you're going to cut almost all the way to the top, leaving about an inch or an inch and a half at the top for us to stick. So just take your scissors and chop them up, chop. So you're cutting several pieces at the one time, so it's a lot easier for yourself. I wouldn't do loads of these at a time because tulle gets really messy once it's cut. So you'll have to just sort of cut as you go, I suppose. And then when it comes to sticking onto our headpiece, you're going to want to cover your finger with masking tape, really loosely with masking tape, because you can use your finger then to squeeze down the glue, the dress net. It's completely porous, like totally see-through, so the glue is just going to go straight through that and onto your fingers. So this is the best way to protect your fingers. Or you can have, if you have a thimble, you can get like rubber thimbles. I've used those in the past as well, and that kind of sticks on your finger, but I find they fall off, so the tape is just going to stay there solid and it won't burn you. You'll feel the heat, but you won't get burned if you put your finger straight into the glue with the masking tape on your finger. So yeah, so I'm going to set the camera up and I'm going to start sticking our tulle onto our headpiece. So here we go, we've got our piece of tulle rolled off. I think just fold this as much as you can, really, because you know it'll mean you have to do less cuts. Trying to keep those edges as together as possible. If you're finding this tulle is moving around a lot, you can obviously put a pin in there, and that'll stop that from wiggling around if you have a pin. And you're just going to cut almost all the way. I'm making these, but 2 centimeters, 1.5 centimeters, 2 centimeters wide. There's no real rule. We're just trying to make a fluffy looking headpiece. You have to go in that way at the end, and there you have your piece cut, chopped up. As I said, they stick to each other, become a bit of a nightmare, so I wouldn't cut loads of them in advance unless you have somewhere that you can kind of leave them sitting by themselves so they don't get all caught up. Also, if you're wearing like a woolen jumper, you're better off not. These get caught so easily, get caught in your jumper, so that's just another little thing to think about. So we're going to start. Make sure you've got your finger covered, or if you've got a little bit of foam to back this down. But I think this is the best way because it means you're not having to lift something up. You can just go straight in with putting your fingers into the glue. So I'm going to start down here at the cheek, and I'm just going to fold the dress net over a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of glue there. And I'm just going to get straight in there with my fingers at the bottom. I'm going to hold that in place. This will obviously take a little time to dry in. So I've sent the dress neck down the way. So we're going to do down the way at the bottom, so I'll cover in the neck and stuff. And then the next layer we're going to put kind of like sticking out, and then the top one we're going to stick it up the way. And then when it's all completed, we kind of scrunch it a little bit so that they stick to each other, and it'll make a nice kind of ball of hair. So as I said before, you don't want to eliminate the stretch in the lycra or it's not going to fit people's heads. So you won't be gluing a line along there because that'll take the stretch away. So you'll always skip a gap, and you'll just let the dress net sit, not glued to anything. So there's a big chunk that's not glued to anything. So I'm just going to leave that there. I'm going to skip maybe 1.5 inches, and I'm just putting a little bit of glue in there. And in I go there again with my finger. I can feel the heat, but it's not gonna burn you. So that little bit is sitting there, so we've got the stretch in between. And again, the same thing, another little bit out, and another little circle of glue. I don't know if you can see that in the video. And get the finger in there again. That's it, just making sure that's stuck before you move on. You can see it's already just sticking to itself. So I'm sticking 2 pieces together at the same time. If you do them in a single, you'll be there forever. So you want to have at least two pieces together to get the best out of what you're doing. A little circle. So you can see I'm not really putting loads and loads of globs of glue on. I'm only putting on a small amount and then letting it spread out so it catches as much of the tulle as possible. Tulle or dress net, I guess this is technically dress net, and tulle is fancier for wedding dresses and things, so this is more like rigid, soft. So we'll go all the way over to the other side, and then we're going to do next layer up. Sticking to itself. Now this time you're going to come in a little bit from the front because we want to make the front really nice. We're going to do that separate afterwards. So we're doing our back part at the moment. So we're going to skip that bit in. And we're going to crunch this up a little bit, scrunch rather, and just above where you put the other glue, you're just going to pop that down into it. So you see this time I'm trying to get it sticking out the way and not down the way. If you struggle with that, just stick it whatever way you can get it on basically, because as I said before, these will scrunch into each other at the very end. You can see that's happening already. So just let me stick on whatever way you can manage. This is probably a good time to get your mannequin head put onto something with a heavy bottom. So if you can tape it onto a bowl, heavy bowl, mixing bowl, or ceramic plant pot, just what I use quite often. It'll just mean this doesn't wobble around so much. So if you have something, just tape it on, and use loads of tape from the bottom and just go around your pot or whatever. Just quickly, really, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just folding this a bit as I go as well, just to get a bit more volume. And again, I'm always leaving those gaps so that this can stretch out a bit more if it needs. And down that goes. So you continue that all the way around to the other side, and then you do another layer at the top, and then at the very end we'll put a piece that goes across the top here, and we'll leave this sequin fabric visible, because this will match the dresses that these guys are wearing as well. So yeah, I will fast forward to the next part. So I'll fill up this and I'll fast forward to putting on the last piece at the front. So I have put my 3 layers across all the way around to the other side. And what we need to do now is make pieces that will become like a bridge over the top. So you would glue one here, one end here, and you would let it kind of flow over the top, and then you glue the other side here. So I've got a piece that kind of roughly would fit that. I folded it over 4 times, so I guess this is like maybe 2 hands long. That's one way to kind of look at it. There's no real right and wrong as long as it's not stretched across the top. So you basically would just sit it across the top, glue it on one side, and then glue it on the other. So I'm going to set the camera up so to show you me putting them on, because you'd put one there across near the back, then you'd put one in the middle, and then you'd put one at the front here. So there we have our piece that's folded over 4 times, and as I said, we're just going to make like a little bridge across the top. Just going to flip that around so you can see what I'm doing. So starting on one side, a little bit of glue, and again you can have your fingers covered. I'm just going to stick that down. Again, my fingers are well used to it, so it's pretty easy for me to just jump straight in. And then you've got quite a lot of excess here, and that is totally fine because this is going to have to fit on somebody's head. So you're going to give yourself a little bit of extra there. So that's glued down on that side. And then you've got the start of a little bridge at the top. So you can see it's starting to fill out the space. So you'll need another one here, and you'll need another one at the front. So we're going to go now in the middle. Again, just little dabs of glue. You really don't need very much for this at all. I'm just going to put that down. This time I'm going to scrunch that in a little bit so I've got two or three little fold overs there to fill in that space. And then that is, once that's dried in, I'm getting that across to the other side. And again, another little scrunch there. In we go with our glue. And glue that down. Hopefully you find these easy enough. They don't kind of your head too much. So now we're going to put one at the front. One down there. I think we'll need 4 actually, now that I see this coming together. So I'm pretty close to the front here now. And again, as I said, we just fold that over a little bit. And squeeze that down. There. Yeah, so there's a little gap there, you can see. It's going to want to get a little piece onto that cardboard part that we've done already. That's quite well filled out now. So we're just going to shove that back out of the way, and we're going to do this final last piece here, and that's pretty full all the way. We'll scrunch those in. Just gets a bit like some mad hair. So yeah, so our last one here, so I just got to cut that and I'll restart the video, show you that one. Now this last bit is actually going to be your most tricky part, because we're not just going to stick it down on 2 sides. We're going to fold it a little bit and we're going to attach it onto the cardboard and the sequins that's here. So what we're going to do is, I have a piece here ready to go. We're just going to start on one side. This is why it's tricky, because it's going to catch in everything that you're doing. And you're just going to give that a little bit of a fold. And you're going to start start where there's a gap, so just beside where we started in the first place, where we started down here. So you're going to start right beside that. And you glue straight onto your sequin this time. And you're just going to get that shoved in there. Now you can see I'm folding it slightly different to how we've done the other ones. Doesn't matter how much glue you use on this one, because this is not the stretchy bit. So just folding it over and sticking that down. Again, you would have your fingers covered over. Catching in everything. Another fold. Stick that down. I don't find this glue hot at all once you really spread it out, so hopefully as long as you're spreading it out you won't get any glue gun burns. So I'm just kind of scrunching it in there. These edges, you just want them neat, you don't want them like hanging down loads. This kind of edge is totally fine though, because what you're going to have is a matching hair matching the sequin here. So like this is really obvious because it's red on white, white on red. And likewise with your lycra, that is going to be the same colour as your hair, so it'll all join in together, it'll all merge. So it won't be so obvious as what I'm doing. I guess obvious what I'm doing is good for you guys because you can really see what I'm doing. Now it could be helpful if you have a piece of fabric and you could actually just put the fabric over this away from what you're doing near this end bit. You just stop these from sticking in each other. Let's see, I have something there. So if you had your excess sequin fabric, let's say, or whatever it is that you're using, you could actually just give her a bit of a hairband and tie that and hide that stuff away. That might make this job a bit easier for yourself and give you that freedom to stick this stuff down. So it's really scrunchy, the front bits are scrunched and squashed in and what have you. Hopefully that's quite clear. Just scrunching and pushing all the way to the end. And as I said, it depends what size you cut these pieces. I'm doing this all in one piece. It just happens to fit all the way. So I didn't measure that. So you just work with whatever you feel comfortable to work with. And then when you release the rest of your crazy wig, this naturally in time is going to kind of scrunch anyway, be shoved in and out of bags and kids will be taking them on and off and that kind of thing. So yeah, so that is it all the way around. Everything gets stuck to this tulle once it's cut, so you just need to be careful how you store these away. They'll pick up everything. If like me you have dogs or cats or animals in the house, definitely better to keep these well away and probably put them into a bag. We might give you a fabric bag to stick these into, because dog hairs, cat hairs, they just love to stick themselves to this chopped up tulle, and once they get stuck there it's very hard to get that off. So yeah, so that is our disco dancers headpieces. So one little thing that I have just added at the end, if you could do this before you go near putting the tulle or dress net onto your band, is to put a tiny little bit of what I would call children's foam, and that's like little soft foam, just on the forehead, just a little triangle, in case somebody has very sensitive forehead. This will just give that little bit of comfort there. It's only a small little piece, and it's maybe 3 inches. I'm and we'll send you those just to pop those in there, pretty much in that position there. So it's not right at the very edge of the thing here, it's just pushed back a little tiny bit, and that'll just give a nice soft surface. So here we go with our 70s dancer's dress. This is a really basic shape. We'll make a few different sizes. I've made this one to fit the mannequin, which will be about a size 10 to 12. So we'll give you a few different variations in sizes, but I've already gone ahead and just cut this out. You'll receive a template for that, for the right size that you'll be making. Here's my template that I made. So you'll have one with 2 sides on it. So yeah, so you can just lay that down on your poly cotton fabric. You'll have a darker blue than this and a purple. So very little of this is going to be seen, so it doesn't really matter what colour is underneath, because we're going to cover this with a lovely sparkly fabric. So here we have our fabric laid out on the sequin fabric. We have our template for our dress. You'll also get the template for a sleeve, and then this triangular template for the edges, which are going to go onto your sleeves. So what I've done is I folded this fabric in half. You can see there. You'll have a very similar fabric to this. The sequins will be a little bit bigger maybe, but roughly the same kind of fabric. So what you're going to do is cut out your dress pattern. And if you want to, at the same time, if you've got the space, you could cut out these triangular pieces as well. So depending on how wide your sequins go on the fabric that you've got, you might alter this triangular piece, and that is totally fine. There's no specific rule for the size of this, just maybe that they match on both sides. So for any reason you end up putting your pattern down a little bit this way or a little bit that way, your dress pattern, you might just have to adjust this, and that is totally fine. Like on that one, that's kind of touching the corner here, and I pop that on the other side. I have a wee bit more space, so that's fine. I'm not going to hold you to trying to get the exact middle of the fabric. Just if you're able to get these two cut in the same size. So that is your pieces that you're going to add to the end of your sleeve. Now, before I cut them, I just want to say that we want our sequin fabric to be a wee bit bigger, I suppose, than our poly cotton fabric. So by bigger, that'll also mean that our sleeves are going to be a little smaller. So when you're cutting your sequin fabric, don't cut it in line with what we have here. Cut a little bit outside, and when you do a little bit outside of this one, that will by effect be a little bit smaller. And that's good because we're going to lay this over the blue when we're completely finished, and we're not going to finish the edges of the sequin because it doesn't fray, so it'll sit over the sewing lines that you've put on when you put your sleeve on. So the same thing at the neck, don't cut it flush with the neck pattern, cut it a little bit in, just like 0.5 centimeter or thereabouts, and that'll make the neck a little bit smaller, and that's what we're looking for. So I have trimmed off my sequin fabric there. So I've left that about 2 centimeters there. It really doesn't have to be exact. These dresses are going to fall down really easily, kind of neatly. So you're not going to notice if you have a wiggly edge or anything. So then here I've just gone 0.5 centimeter outside, and there is the arm done the same way. So it's up a little bit, so it makes this armhole a little bit smaller, which is good. So when you open out your double-sided sequin sleeve end, you're going to lay that down on your sleeve, your poly cotton sleeve. So what you're going to do is you're going to get this fabric to meet the very end of your sleeve fabric there. Then you're going to put a little mark where that sequin ends on your poly cotton. So that will be your sleeves ready to put on, and we're going to use that little mark that you've just put on your sleeve to know where to stop sewing, so that we can add on our sequin fabric. So for sewing the dress together, you're just going to run a line of stitch across each shoulder, And then we're going to add our sleeves on. And once the sleeves are added on, we're going to add the sequin onto those sleeves. Then we're going to run our stitch down the sides from the underarm all the way to the bottom of the dress. So once we have that done, we'll be hemming our edges. But for the moment, we're going to run our stitches across the shoulders, add on our sleeves, add on our sequin fabric, and then sew down the sides. So there's the top of our shoulders sewn together. Very simple, straight line stitch. And I've just taken my sleeve and I folded it over so that the edges are matching. And I have found the center point of that pattern. So what we're going to do next is when you open that up, you are going to join that center point, little mark there, into the corner of our shoulder. I'll pin that in place and I'll show you how to put that together. So there's our center point of the sleeve, and that is pinned on to the edge of our shoulder. And so what you would do is pop that into the sewing machine, and you would sew these sides all the way down in one direction until you reach the edge of your armhole. So from there all the way down to there. Then you would flip it around and you would start in the center again and do the same on the other side. So just in case you've never sewn an arm on before, that's just a little visual there. So all the sewing is on the inside there. Now there'll be a bit of manipulation of your fabric on this because you're trying to add a piece of fabric that's this shape to a piece of fabric that's that shape. So you'll have to kind of pull them together as you go. I've pinned them there, but I wouldn't pin them when I was sewing them, so it's up to you if you want to pin them. I just pinned them to show you. But yeah, if pinning makes you feel better, then you can absolutely do that. Otherwise, your pin at the top should be enough to keep you in track, because you'll be pulling this fabric and kind of manipulating it through your machine as you're going. So on my pattern, I have a little bit of excess fabric after we've got to the end of that's the end of the armhole there, and this is the end of the sleeve, so they don't quite match, but that's fine. I've just made this pattern a little bit too big, so no problem there. So the next thing that I did was to hem the edges of your sleeve, so the two sides and where the cuff would be. So I just did a one fold over and a zigzag stitch, which is sufficient to keep it in place. So the next thing we're going to do is flip this around so that we're working on what will be the outside of the dress, and we're going to add our sequin fabric. So I have just laid down the sequin fabric long triangle that you cut out, and I've laid that down on the sleeve with the edge of the sequin fabric pretty much where the cuff is. Be okay to kind of put that a little bit over that as well. I think that's quite acceptable because we really want to see the sequins. We don't really want to see so much of the poly cotton underneath, and that should match up roughly with where you put your little marks earlier. Yeah, so that's right there. So you're actually just going to pin that in place, and you're going to run a stitch across the top here. Then you're going to run a stitch across the bottom, and once those two are secured in place, we'll fold our sleeve in half down the middle, and we'll sew from our underarm all the way out. So once you have those pieces sewn, you should end up with your sleeve looking a bit like this. Now I've actually only pinned this together, but you'll have sewn it. So you'll have sewn your lines up here, and then you'll have folded your sleeve in half and then sewn from here out to the end of your cuff. Now at the moment I'm going to leave these not sewn together, just because sequin fabric by itself without something underneath it is quite difficult to put through the sewing machine, and depending on the kind of sewing machine that you have. So we're just going to leave that. You might want to tidy up the little bit here because we're a little bit off with our template, and I'm not going to change that just in case your cutting is a bit different to mine. So you could just take a scissors and just kind of chop off that funky little edge there, and that should be your sleeve. So we're going to move on now to sewing together the main part of the dress that we're going to sit over our blue polycotton. So here's our sequin pattern cut out. So we're just going to turn this inside out so that you've got sequin facing sequin there, and you're going to match those up. Mine is a bit messy at the minute, but I've pinned the top shoulder. So you're literally going to do the same thing you did with the polycotton dress, only without the sleeves. So you're just going to run a stitch across the top of the shoulders, and then you're going to start from the underarm, and you're going to sew that together all the way to the edge of your dress. So once that's done, we're just going to pop that on top of the blue polycotton dress, and we're just going to leave it sitting on top of the dress. I don't even think we're going to sew it. If I change my mind in the meantime, I'll let you know, but I think we're just going to leave it sitting on the dress itself. So when you're done, you should end up with something that looks like this. So you'll have your long sleeves, you'll have your sequin pattern just sitting over your colour underneath. Obviously these two don't really go together, which is why I didn't sew the sleeves on there. But yours will be pinks and purples and blues, so they'll all match in together. One thing I forgot to note is that you need to hem your neckline. So yeah, you'll have to hem that neckline once you've been doing your main sewing. I also, you can see in my mirror there, that I have put a little split in the back of the neck for both of those two, because the neck is quite small. But I like the high neck, so we will put those little splits in the back for that, yeah.